Toda rabba, thank you very much. And I'd like to cut further introductions and opening remarks short. I'll do a little bit of housekeeping. I'm sorry if I will sound too teachery and discipline oriented, but I have developed, like many of us, some experience with Zoom sessions. I'd like to remind everybody to try and keep their mics muted, and I will ask for opportunities for people to make comments or ask questions. And at that time, please, by all means, unmute yourself and make your comment or question. And without further ado, let me put on the screen my PowerPoint, which will help me introduce the topic. So when you have turned to me a couple of weeks ago or whatever to ask me whether I would consider joining this learning series of sessions, I said I'd love to. And since it's Yom Ha'atzmaut, and since my particular field of expertise in Jewish education is trying to give people an insight into Israeli society through its literature. If you ever go and visit my internet site, it will start with the slogan, "Don't just talk about Israel, let Israel talk to you through its literature and poetry." And when we come to Yom Ha'atzmaut, we may want to consider the fact that secular Israel, and I'm really stressing that, has its own book of sacred texts. I know it sounds like something that doesn't make sense, which I just said, and yet I'll repeat it. Secular Israel has a collection, an anthology, a book of holy texts. And if such a thing indeed exists, and I believe it is, then the Silver Platter by Natan Alterman is probably on one of the first 3 pages of that sacred book. Natan Alterman was a poet that if I wanted to properly introduce you, I'll never get to my session. So Google him, a major, major poet who passed away 50 years ago in the year 1970. And he is known for beautiful, lyrical, epic poetry, but best known and remembered for a collection of 6 volumes, mind you, of what is called the 7th column. He was a night editor at the daily paper, Davar, at the time, but also published every Friday on the 7th column of the paper. You remember the time when newspapers were still paper? And when you hold a paper in your hand, they have columns. And if you count from right to left, because this is Israel, on the 2nd page, and the 7th would be your last column on the left. And this is where Natan Alterman would have his reactions. I often suggest and even teach courses when we look together with people at the history of those years of Israel through the lens of Alterman's poetry. But if you had to now sift it down from all of Natan Alterman's writings to the 7th column, and from all the 700 pieces in the 7th column to go to the one best known, you will have the Silver Platter. So the Silver Platter also has a motto, which is undersigned by Chaim Weizmann, the first president of the state of Israel, and it goes, "No state is given to a people on a silver platter." And we are going to look at the story behind the birth of Israel's poetic icon, because this is what I would like for us to call the Silver Platter by Natan Alterman. I'd like to draw your attention to 2 graphic images here that we'll look at. One of them is our poet Natan Alterman at his day job, if you wish, as the night editor of the Davar paper. You can also see the font of the title of the Davar paper, long gone, Zichrono Livracha. What I'd like you to pay attention to is on your right-hand side of my slide is an image of a stamp. I still hope you remember the time when we still use stamps for mailing things. And countries and societies and cultures will honor events or people or historical milestones by editing and publishing a stamp in their honor. In this particular case, Israel had published and used a postal stamp that is dedicated and honoring not the poet altogether, not the 7th column, 6 volumes altogether, but just this one poem. So it tells you a little bit about how it is treated as an Israeli text. Let us start by looking at the text first and maybe just reading a few words of the Hebrew and then the English, because I will sort of tear it apart a little bit later. I'd like for us to have a glimpse of the text itself, and the font that you have on your right-hand side of the Hebrew is as it appears in the paper. So we are in December of 1947. We'll come to that in a minute. And it is Friday, the 19th of December. And people who normally wait every week to see, so what does the poet has to say in this particular week? And the Alterman column will probably be the topic of conversation. So here you have it, Magash Kesef, a few words of Hebrew. If you belong to my generation in Israel, and maybe even one younger like my children, you normally had at one point or another a teacher who made you commit this to memory or ask you, as we said at the time, to learn it by heart. So I belong to that generation. והארץ תשקוט אין שמיים אודמת, תעמעם לאיתה על גבולות השנים, ואומה תעמוד קרועת לב אך נושמת, לקבל את הנס האחד אין שני. היא לטקס תיכון, היא תקום למול סהר, ועמדה טרם יום אותה חג ואימה. אז מנגד יצאו נערה ונער, ואט אט יצעדו הם אל מול האומה. I'm going to stop here with the Hebrew because every minute is precious today. I need to finish on time because I have another class at 9 o'clock our time, 2 p.m. your time on the East Coast. I'm wondering if there is anybody back among our participants who enjoys reading aloud in English and would like to lead us in the reading of the translation of the Silver Platter. If there is anyone, just unmute yourself, say your name, and then I'll say yes, and then everybody else remains muted. Do we have a reader? Anybody? Come on. There must be rabbis, teachers among you. You can do it. Your accent is so much better than my Israeli one.
I'll take it.
Go.
I'll read.
We got Michael. But there'll be more, not to worry. Go, Michael.
And the land will grow, still crimson, skies dimming, misting, slowly paling again over smoking frontiers, as the nation stands up torn at heart, but existed to receive its unique wonder in 2,000 years. As the moment draws near, it will rise, darkness facing, standing straight in the moonlight in terror and joy. When across from it step out towards it slowly pacing, in plain sight of all, a young girl and a boy. Dressed in battle gear, dirty shoes heavy with grime, on the path they will climb up while their lips remain sealed, to change garb, to wipe brow they have not yet found time, still bone weary from days and from nights in the field. Full of endless fatigue and all drained of emotion, yet the dew of their youth is still seen on their head. Thus, like statues, they stand stiff and still with no motion, and no sign that they will show if they live or are dead. Then a nation in tears and amazed at this matter will ask, "Who are you?" And the two will then say, with soft voice, "We are the silver platter on which the Jew state was presented today." Then they fall back in darkness as the dazed nation looks, and the rest can be found. That's all I can see.
In the history books, והשאר יסופר בתולדות ישראל. Thank you for a wonderful reading. Please remember to mute yourself. A couple of quick things to notice. Notice the young boy and young girl, no parade garb, dirty battle garb. Notice the nation waiting. Notice the so Jewish moment of beginning as the sun sets, which is when the new days come in. It's not midnight, it's not dawn. And then look at another phenomena, just these two elements that I'd like to pull up at this moment. Nation, two soldiers talking to each other, then they fall. And when they respond, I'll do the Hebrew again, אנחנו מגש הכסף שעליו לך ניתנה מדינת היהודים. The English says, we are the silver platter on which the Jew state was presented today. One will have to ask, hang on, I mean, Altman is an Israeli at the time. He does know the name of the state. It's called the State of Israel. Why is he not using it? The answer is simple. This is December of 1947. We do not yet have the name of the state. Ben Gurion had not declared it yet. That will come in May. So for the lack of another name, Altman goes to the obvious, to the name they are all using, and that's the title of Herzl's book, Judenstadt, Medinat HaYehudim, the State of the Jews. So even from a first glance of reading, we have Weizmann in the dedication at the top, and we have already Herzl involved in this poem, and we will have some more. Just hang on with me. Let's go. The two questions I'd like for us to draw your attention to is, when was this poem written exactly? And when did Weizmann say the sentence that became the poem's motto? Why am I insisting on the when of the written? You will see in a moment, but because this poem seems to conclude the war, to arrive at its end when the soldiers are rising from the field and saying, we have done it. And that is very weird because it's not written at the end of the word war, it's rather at the beginning. So there is something that deserves our attention. The time is the time of immediately after the UN partition decision. So this is November 29th, 1947. Had I had all the time that I needed, I would show you now a quick clip with the vote that many of us have heard a zillion times, Argentina, yes, etc., etc., and then into the events and the riots of Arabs immediately, the rejoicing among Jews, and the beginning of the fighting. So we'll skip the movie. Those of you who absolutely want it, email me, I'll send you the link. Also, I'd like to give you a quick timeline of Israel's independence war so that we know what we are talking about. So UN petition, I'm doing the dates as Israelis do. So day first, months next, and the year. I hope you can handle that. So UN petition, state declared in May. So the period in between we will relate to as the Civil War, because the Brits are still ruling. Arabs and Jews are fighting each other. Both parts are citizens of the British Mandate and therefore civil war. Then comes the three phases of the War of Independence, of which we shall not talk today, because the silver platter is here at the very beginning. And it sounds like a poem of the end of a war. This is what we address ourselves to. These are just questions because I offer these PowerPoint presentations for people who want to use them, yourselves included if you need it, so it always have some suggestions for points of attention for the teacher. I just drew out the calendar for December of 1947, and even if you cannot read the small print on your screens, you know that if in December we have a blue mark for 8 consecutive days, this must be Hanukkah. And indeed, so let us look. The 1st of December is a Monday. So the Sunday was November 30th, which means the Saturday before was the day of the partition. By the way, it was afternoon in New York when it was done. Had you been an observant Jew, you wouldn't be able to follow it on the radio. But by the time of the end of it, in Israel, it's already after Shabbat, so everybody is listening. The fighting will start immediately the following day. It's not yet the invasion of the Egyptians, the Syrians, etc. It's just between Jews and Arabs in the country, mainly on the roads, okay? On that Friday, Natan Alterman publishes a poem. Of course he does. We just had the petition plan, but it's not the silver platter. It is called in English, And There Was Evening, Vayehi Erev. So the silver platter, the huge poem, is not the poet's reaction to this unbelievable event of the promise of having a state? No, it is not. On the next Friday, something very unique and rare happens. No seventh column. Alterman is not writing. That's very unique, questionable. And only on the 19th, 2 weeks later, on the Friday, will the silver platter appear. So we are now addressing ourselves to the question of what was And There Was Evening, his first gut reaction to the events, and what happens between the two poems. So here are the questions for the teachers. Let's have a quote by Chaim Guri, another famous poet of the period, who says that on the night of the partition decision, the last of the partygoers met the first ones who were killed. That was the night. They were dancing hora in the streets of Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim, and they were already people losing their lives on the roads. Here is And There Was Evening, Vayehi Erev. I'm doing a very quick, just a few lines of the Ivrit, and then we will go again to the English. ואנשי מדינת היהודים אז מחו מלחיים בשרוול, את דמעת השמחה אין עדים, ויודו לאלוהי הגמול. How I wish I had all the time that I need for here, but let's pay attention. And the people of the Jewish state, so again, the Jewish state, the Judenstaat, not the state of Israel, we don't have that yet, whipped off their cheek with their sleeves a witnessless tear of joy, and had praised the God of reward. Please look at the Hebrew. The title says Vayehi Erev, so Alterman makes a very clear biblical reference to the fact that we are at the moment of creation. Vayi Boker Vayi Erev. I trust you know this quote, at least as well as me, probably better. And then look at the last or the fourth line here, Elohei Hagmul. The English doesn't capture the connectedness to Birkat Hagomel, and is Alterman suggesting after all the events that preceded, after the Shoah, after revival, you greet the new event with Birkat Hagomel. No dancing hora for Alterman, a tear and a bracha, a blessing. And he continues the language of bracha. ויברכו איש אחיו בדברים מעטים. And they had praised the God of reward. They congratulated each other with few words, because these are people of few words, the people of the War of Independence, and turned to the border post. And it was evening like yesterday. The moon's eyes stood watching, and Albion smiled soundlessly, and Arabia pulled out its knife. Look at the dangers. To me, the major sense of this poem is a sense of fear, if I don't want to go a step further and say panic. The poet is scared. He knows that Albion, that's Britain, is standing on the sidelines and just watching and waiting for the Arab-Jewish clash, for the battles, and indeed it's about to happen. And everything as it had always been, yet everything had become so different, as a unique wind, ruach, had passed. Now I'd like you again to refer to the Hebrew, all those of you who can. Ya'an ruach echad chalfa, clear connotation to an event in the book of Iyov, when the wind comes and destroys the whole house on you, ruach echad chalfa. By the way, for all teachers, rabbis, etc., I have the document with all the biblical quotes. I will send it to you, Av, and he can let you have it if you are interested. Since the ruach of, and I kept the word ruach, since the ruach of the awesome day, HaChag HaNorah, Chanukah is coming, remember, hit the Jews like a sea and dropped in the elect the news like a warm newborn. And all as before, just a white crib came to be in the nation's heart. Look at another puzzling image. The birth of the new state is not two upright soldiers like in the silver platter. It's a vulnerable baby. So tears, prayers, reference to the book of Iyov and a destructive wind, and then a helpless, vulnerable baby in your hands. The whole imagery is an imagery of need for protection, of fear, of, in Hebrew, I would emphasize the word like chashash, you know, they are so scared, like a warm newborn, and all as before, etc. And when the fires leap to the roof, remember the ruach and the continuation of the Iyov imagery. And when the fire leap to the roof to threaten with fear, they joined the holiday's candles. No malasot, Chanukah was coming in the poor home of a generation. On the forehead brightly shining the inscription of life and freedom. I'd like for us to remember another thing. And I sound like nitty-gritty, but I have to. December 47, we did not yet have a first ever Yom HaAtzmaut. And for the Yishuv, for the Jewish people in the land of Israel, prior to the birth of the state, the holiday to celebrate freedom, sovereignty, victory in wars, etc., was Hanukkah. So for Alterman, this is a natural connotation that this will be the holiday in which we will somehow also greet joyfully and celebrate in spite of all the concerns. So keep with you the spirit, the ruach of this poem that nobody remembers anymore. If anybody remembers anything from Alterman's reaction to that great decision, it's the silver platter. And let's wonder why this one will disappear from collective memory and only the other will be remembered. One of the things that we were looking for an answer for is what happened between the two poems. So I'm reading to you from a quote from an article by Dan Laor, Professor Dan Laor from Tel Aviv University, emeritus now, I believe, who is one of the greatest researchers of Nathan Alterman. He has a special article about Mangash Kesef, and he is not the only one. 14 days had passed. He is writing about this period between the two poems. From the publication of And There Was Evening to the publication of The Silver Platter, in those days, the violence acts grew and it became clear that the state that had not yet been born is on the threshold of an existential war. The newspapers had reported the fighting daily. I'm not going to take you through this. I'll give you the letzten Teshorah, the last line. Look at it. All right, black framed list of all those who were killed throughout the country on the previous day. By December 18th, remember, between November 30th and December 18th, which is the date when the Silver Platter is written, the number of dead had reached 120. I gave it to you in a special frame because God forbid, chas v'chalila, we would have within 18 days 120 people killed and who knows how many through terrorist attacks or fighting. This country will go into such a deep mourning and devastation. And we are 8 million now, Jewish people here. Think about the time, by the time Ben Gurion declares the state, we are 600,000. So we are 6 months before, 500,000. And out of 500,000, 120 killed. Like if you're a teacher, if you're a doctor, if you have family that belongs to the age group of people who get hit, the country is in a devastating state in those days. These were terrible 2.5 weeks. Of the many devastating battles taking place in those 2 weeks, we shall now focus on the Battle of Shaot. Don't feel embarrassed if you do not know about it. It really needs some paying attention. It is probably the one capturing the spirit of the day most, if one needs to grade them. This is the memorial of the Battle of Shaot. I'm showing you a map, and I know it's all in Hebrew, and I'm a nice person, so let me help you. Here is Beersheba. You can see this is the Nirim water pipeline. Just to be sure, I told you where the sea is so that you can orient yourself. And I need for you to look at the sort of the turquoise line going sort of up and then down again. This is the pipeline for water that is created from Beersheba to 11 kibbutzim that were built that year. Long story, I do not have the time for it. Obviously, there are lots of Arab villages and towns along this line, and not as many Jewish settlements as we have them today. And therefore, the builders of the pipeline need to be protected. So they're placing palmach units in every one of the kibbutzim along the line. Note that our particular one has smack in the middle a young woman. Very unique. She is the only one, okay? And we are talking about the particular section of the line, now with the right arrow, between Kibbutz Gvulot and Kibbutz Nirim. So there's a group patrolling and helping the builders to safely go on with their work. A small palmach unit with the woman soldier there. We are now on December 9th of 1947, Kaf Zayin Kislev in Hanukkah. They are protecting the line. They, by mistake, getting into the village of Shaot and immediately are attacked. The commander of the group of 9 people, Asaf Shechnai of blessed memory, commands the 6 of his people to try and go back. He will remain with 2 to defend them. Of the 6 who went, only 3 reached back to safety. The other 3 got killed, among them Miriam Shachar. I put among the 6 who were killed the picture of the commander and the picture of the young woman. Because remember, we are working our way to Natan Alterman and to the silver platter. And on these days, on that week, there is an event when a young boy and a young girl have fought in battle and died. This is the first battle on the Negev. Hebrew readers can see on the memorial, במקום זה, בכ"ז כסלו, חנוכה, נפלו בידי מרצחים מהכפר שעות, ראשוני לוחמי הפלמ"ח בהגנה על הנגב. This is the first battle for the Negev, obviously not the last. If you look at the birth dates of these 2 young people, you will see that none of them have reached the age of 19. And on top of that, Miriam Shachar came from an observant family, modern Orthodox family, and she was engaged to be married. So this is the date. Not that on the other days of these weeks were much easier than that. Let's go back to our calendar. You remember it now, don't you? Here is the Battle of Shaot. And here is the Shaot funeral. So Americans will not gasp, maybe, but Israelis will get 3 days? What happened? Why so long? Because they are within the premises of the Arab village. The Jews, it's not yet our states. The Brits are ruling, and they will have to intervene with the Arabs. The Brits will have to, so that the bodies can be brought to burial, mutilated, obviously. The person who got involved with the Brits to make this happen was the chief rabbi, Ashkenazi rabbi of the time, Rav Herzog, who was the father of our 6th presidents, Chaim Herzog, and the grandfather of the head of the Jewish Agency, nowadays Bushi Herzog. You can imagine the tension in the country at the time, the worrying, the families, the wanting to make sure that they are brought to be buried. And indeed, when the funeral takes place, thousands of people, they are all buried in Tel Aviv, but in the Trumpeldor Cemetery, but for Asaf Shachnai, who was buried in Haifa, where he had lived. At a later interview, Chaim Guri was asked by Dan Laor, "Do you remember if Alterman was present at the funeral?" To which Guri replied, "I couldn't see him, but I cannot imagine that he was not." So all of Tel Aviv is out there. These events going on in this week can maybe explain to us why Alterman is not in the mood to write and why on the 12th of December we do not have a seventh column. And now the funeral is over and Shabbat comes and we are after Shabbat, and our night editor has to look at the material at his hand in order to publish what he will publish in the Sunday paper of the Val. So two texts. One is the eulogy of Mr. Shachor, Miriam Shachor's father. Do I have an English reader for that? Very short reading. I'd love for one of you to read it. Anybody?
I'll read it.
Thank you.
A shudder ran through the youth gathering when the teacher, Miriam Shahar's father, stood up to deliver his eulogy in all of the bereaved parents' name. "I am not here to eulogize nor to shed tears," he had said. "I come to encourage. I call upon the youth to enroll and fill up the ranks. My beloved Miriam was privileged to fall as a hero on the holy soil and to sanctify the soil of the Negev. We, the parents, are privileged to know we have raised sons who knew how to protect the homeland. The people of Israel will rise and build its state."
Thank you very much for a beautiful reading. Beyond the choking in our throats as we look at these words, I'd like for you to start looking at what Alterman is looking at. Did somebody bring him the words? Did he quickly go with the female family after the Levaya for the beginning of the Shiva before Shabbat? Who knows? But he has the text and he looks at the story of a young woman and the other man and not crying and cheered up and offered a state. The editor has another text in front of him. And if you look at the Hebrew, you will say at the title, the beginning, the letters MD, Mem Dalid, which in Hebrews will mean Ma'arechet Devar. That will mean that it's the editor-in-chief who is writing this. I don't think that the night editor is editing very much out of that. It's his boss writing. Who is the editor of the VAR in those days? That's Zalman Shazar, later to be the third president of the state of Israel. So any reader for that, this is a lovely piece, and I promise you whoever reads it will have a very emotional text to handle. Anybody?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Read. Go ahead, read.
Dvar Hayom. We have accompanied you, as we are doing now every day. The battle had only started and its phases and end cannot yet be seen. In your death, you are emerging out of the underground and the world knows. These are the pioneer soldiers of the uniformless army, of the people army who stand ready for order in their daily toil.
Will you stop for a minute, sir? Just a sec. The uniformless, no parade uniform. Remember Magasha Kesef, the silver platter? Please continue.
Who go to the outpost between two working days, who modestly hide their heroism of any stranger's eye and buries it the lap of all the coming generations.
You remember the encounter between the soldiers and the nation? We have a grain of that here. Please continue.
In this short journey from the place of death to the place of rest, we learn that you have been soldiers in this gray army and like shining light. In these short hours, let the people know these are those who are doing the work in darkness so their light may shine. As we see your parents clinging to your coffins and your friends marching silently as the light of your sacrifice brings them to, out of the shrouded secret for a short while. In these moments when the barrier between the longing for Geulah and the destroyed young lives disappears, all of us know it is not only in your death that we accompany you, but in all your journey. This road is shared by all of us, to those who went today and those who will go tomorrow. There is no side alley. This is why there are so many on the road. We are accompanying you. Our heart swells in mourning for those who die, so Israel can live.
These are the two texts Alterman, the night editor, has to handle on that Motzei Shabbat before the Sunday paper is published. If you look up the var of that Sunday, you will find it. And now to the second question. Where and when did Weizmann say that sentence, which is about to become the motto of the poem, The Silver Platter? So here's another researcher, Mordechai Naor, who wrote a book about the seventh column and called it The Eighth Column. And he tells the story to an interviewer how he researched and went to and couldn't find, and went to the Weizmann archives in Rehovot, in the Weizmann Institute, and the librarian makes fun of him. You too, we have searched for years, we couldn't find, just leave it alone. We don't know when he said it. And then Naor says in the interview, I started understanding that I needed to think out of the box and not to look where everybody had looked. And I remembered that I knew about Alterman, that Alterman wasn't a scholar. He wouldn't go to ancient articles. Alterman responded to the daily events. And therefore, says Naor, after so many years, I understood that I needed to look at the daily papers preceding the event. This is a short description. So let us do the same. And you will see that in the New York Times of December 15th, 1947, is reporting of a Jewish fundraising event in the sacred city of Atlantic City, where Weizmann stays. The Magbit, the fundraising people in America, ask him to stay after the petition decision for this major event because they need his presence for the fundraising. And this is where he said it. No such state has been handed to us on a silver platter. So lo and behold, that sentence, etc., Haaretz will report it the following day, not Davar, not Alterman's paper. And we have the translation of the Haaretz translator. I even looked up to see who he was. So, ladies and gentlemen, the motto for Israel's maybe most famous poem was not delivered in the land of Israel, and it was not even uttered for the first time in Hebrew. It was said in America, so that may connect all of us now looking at these texts together. Let us go back to our calendar. So we have the two texts, the eulogy and the editor's comments that we just read, appearing and being published on the 14th. We had the UJA fundraising event in Atlantic City. The New York Times reports, Haaretz follows, and now we have the 3 days, the birth of a national icon. These are the days that Alterman, I think, I hope, maybe I even know, pulls himself together and understands that facing what is coming, the nation needs a hope. The nation needs something to hang on to and to know that the day will come when these daily sacrifices will be over and we will have our own state. And this is when he will write the silver platter that normally I would ask somebody to read again now that we have brought it all together for ourselves. But I cannot, because I do want to give you a chance as I'm pulling out of my PowerPoint presentation and allowing myself to see some of you, those who have open cameras and video cameras. I know you have, I said that I needed to leave at 8:45, but I can stay another 5 minutes if people would like to ask a couple of questions or make comments, but I'm handing it over to you, Yoav. Thank you.
I will, I'm thankful for these extra 5 minutes, so I'll just hand it to the crowd if anybody has any questions.
Thank you very much. It's Rebecca Kaufman talking from Northern Virginia, hoping to return to our homeland where I'm a citizen for 12 and a half years now, to my apartment in Bet Shemesh on May 14th, Ezrat Hashem. And I want to ask you if you will very kindly get the presentation recorded, or maybe Rabbi Ende has already done so that we can review it again at our leisure. It was beautiful and wonderful and went straight to my heart, and I can't thank you enough for putting that beautiful, accurate document together for us and sharing with us.
My pleasure. And Yoav, I can also send you the PowerPoint presentation and the text so that you can make it available for people on your institute's internet site.
Yeah, Rabbi Rita would probably do that, I think.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I was wondering, the poem was so beautiful when it was recited. Could somebody recite it in Hebrew? I would like to hear it in Hebrew.
So guys, I will let you handle it because I really, really need to go. It was a pleasure being with you. Thank you for inviting me. And if people are interested, I am teaching a poetry class Sunday to Thursday every night at 2 p.m. East Coast time. And if you will make my email available to people, they can write to me for details.
I don't know what you do.
I didn't touch, I touched it.
Chag Atzmaut Sameach, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you for this wonderful lesson, which was also very emotional, but also taught me some new things. So hello, everybody, to people who I saw before the lesson of Rachel and who have joined us. We are, in about 10 minutes or so, we're starting a very interesting, very important panel forum, which is going to take us from the silver platter of 1948 to Israel of 2020 to start to understand what the soul of the Israeli society and of the Jewish world maybe is of today. But before that, we're lucky to have here